Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome. I am Pam Franks. I'm the class of 1956 director of the Williams College Museum of Art. And while folks are getting settled, I thought I would just do some logistical orienting. We are recording this program tonight and plan to share the complete recording on the museum's website and YouTube channel, along with any other resources that are noted in the chat feature during this program. We expect that the program will run a bit over an hour and will reserve plenty of time towards the end for a question and answer from the audience. So we hope to have a really lively discussion. I invite you to please use the Q&A feature that you can see at the bottom of your screen to share questions that you have for the panelists. Also, if you have any technical questions during the program, we have a number of people behind the scenes making sure that we can help. Please use the chat feature for technical questions. My colleague Beth Fisher, WICMA's Digital Humanities Fellow, and Nina Pelez, Curator of Programs and Interpretation, are here in the background, and they will help support any technical questions or needs that you might have. And I also want to mention that you might see our Director of Communications, Joellen Adai, typing into the chat feature with links and other additional related information during the program. So I want to thank all of these colleagues, as well as Christina Yang, Deputy Director for Engagement and Curator of Education, and Ann Kennedy, Program Coordinator, who are all behind the scenes making sure that this program goes as smoothly as possible tonight. So welcome again. For those of you who were coming in as I was going through some of the logistical information, I'm Pam Franks. I'm the director of the Williams College Museum of Art, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here for tonight's program. This is the second in a year-long series of virtual programs called New Ecologies, which Nina Pelez has conceived and shaped, and which through a wide range of interdisciplinary dialogues explore relationships between art, people, and place. Nina has written a really beautiful and evocative description of this program, so I'm just going to use her words. This series brings together groups of artists and other experts working across disciplines in conversations that explore the interdisciplinary connections between art, community, and environment. The idea for the program stems from an understanding of ecology as the scientific study of organisms' relationships to one another and to their physical surroundings, but also with consideration of the root of the word echo, which comes from the Greek for home. These gatherings prompt consideration about the role of art, creativity, and making in understanding our place and role within community, place, and the natural world. Thank you, Nina, for bringing us this wonderful series. For those of us in the Northern Berkshire region, and those who are connected to the landscape of Williams College and the Williams College Museum of Art, I would like to acknowledge that this place is one that includes the people of the waters that are never still, also known as the Mohican tribe. About 1,500 descendants, now known as the Mohican Nation Stockbridge-Munsee Band, are living today with their land base in Wisconsin. Such an acknowledgement about the past of place, while important, is only a gesture without continued present-day action, learning, relationship building, and collaboration with Indigenous communities, work that we are taking part in and continuing to deepen. I would also encourage you to consider and learn about the history of the land you are on. Thank you. I'm delighted to welcome artists Alice Aycock, Ursula von Rydingsvard, and Rona Pondick to the panel this evening. Thank you all so very much for participating. In this moment of uncertainty and isolation, art is more important than ever. At the same time, the summer saw most museums closed. Currently, we at the Williams College Museum of Art are partially open for academic purposes. But art, in short, access to art has been greatly curtailed over the last 6 months. Excuse me. Sorry, access to art has been greatly curtailed over the last 6 months. Sorry, I had a little technical glitch. One way we at WICMA have responded to the situation is to focus attention on art outdoors. We partnered with our neighbor museums, the Clark and Mass MoCA, to create a GPS-based map of outdoor sculpture, a 10-mile course that you can bike or walk or drive, bringing you to works of art across our 3 campuses. We have also updated our illustrated map of public sculpture on the Williams campus, and that too is available on our website. Tonight's panel continues our focus on art outdoors. We've brought these 3 artists together for this panel because each of them has work connected to the past, present, or future of public art on the Williams College campus. Alice Aycock's Williams College project was installed on campus from 1975 to 1983. Ursula von Rydingsvard's large bowl is currently on view, and Rona Pondick's tree is a new gift to WICMA that hasn't been installed yet. We're delighted to have the chance to hear from each of these 3 artists about their work and thoughts on installing sculpture outdoors, what the potential of outdoor siting holds, what each of you care about in placing work in the landscape, and what kinds of experiences you hope to spur by placing art in the natural or public realm. The way this panel is going to work is as a kind of sequence of short 10 to 15 minute conversations with each artist, followed by an open discussion together with time for question and answer with the audience. Each interviewer will introduce the artist with whom we are speaking, but let me quickly introduce my fellow interlocutors. Elise Mack is a recent graduate of the Williams Clark graduate program. She's earned her MA in 2020, and she's currently research assistant at the St. Louis Art Museum and formerly an intern at WICMA, where she curated the exhibition In the Public Eye, a show that really addressed the Williams College Museum of Art and public art projects at Williams in a really evocative way. And Elise will be in conversation with Alice Aycock, and also Lisa Doran, WICMA's Deputy Director for Curatorial Affairs and Curator of Contemporary Art, who will be in conversation with Ursula von Rydingsvard. And then I will be in conversation with Rona Pondick. So I know that everyone here is eager to hear from the artist, just as I am. So without further ado, let's turn to Alice and Elise.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Pam, for that beautiful introduction. I have the great pleasure of introducing Alice Aycock to you all tonight. Alice's work resides in multiple major collections, indoors and outdoors, including MoMA, the Whitney, the National Gallery, Storm King Art Center, OMI International Art Center, and the Sperringel Museum in Hanover, Germany, and she has exhibited at countless others. Her public works also dot the globe and can be found at New York's East River Park Pavilion, the San Francisco Public Library, JFK Airport, Washington Dulles Airport, and most recently, this summer, at the Royal Tours Garden in Stockholm, Sweden. In the past decade, Alice has created a series of works which reveal organizational systems behind forces which seem chaotic, wind especially, as well as the interactions between opposing concepts like fear and euphoria or danger and safety. As Pam mentioned in her beautiful introduction, Alice installed the Williams College project at the very beginning of her career while she was an artist in residence at Williams College. And it was WICMA's poster of that work, which you can see on your screen now, that served as the springboard for the entire exhibition that I curated in the public eye, which Joellen has graciously posted a link to in the chat. That show examined concepts and controversies surrounding public art at Williams, but more importantly, it led me to call Alice for the first time. Alice, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Well, I wanted to start by asking you a question about sort of the whole trajectory of your career, if that's not too big of a question. So even though it was the Williams College project that introduced me to your work, it was at the very start of your career and at the height of the land art movement. And I personally love this work for the ways that it sheds light on the false binary of nature and culture. Its interior was a structure made of human-crafted cinder blocks, while its exterior very convincingly mimicked the surrounding landscape, so much so that it was ultimately accidentally destroyed. But your work has evolved in all sorts of ways since the 70s. You've continued to produce work that, for me, elegantly disrupts our ability to divide nature and culture, up to and including your most recent Twister series, which reifies wind. This is an elusive and fluid natural thing, but you've done it in metal, which is pretty much the most solid and processed material I can imagine. So could you tell me a little bit about what has changed in your practice between the Williams College project and today, and what has continued to inspire you?
Well, I think it's right that you start with the earth art cited movement that was going on when I began to make art, and I was responding to that, and I was also responding to architecture, and I had been traveling extensively at the time looking at architecture. And my first trip was to Greece, and I was very interested in the tumulus tombs in Greece and how they had sort of inserted themselves into the earth. I wanted to make something at that time that somehow belonged to the earth and felt comfortable in nature and in the world. But I was also aware that whatever an artist does is unnatural in a certain way. Consciousness is unnatural. I mean, there's all of nature, whatever that is, and we're the observers, and then we come along with our consciousness and intersect something and put it in the world. And so at this particular time period as a young artist, I wanted to be very much sort of at home and not make something that was vertical and that interjected itself in a very aggressive way. And so this is one of those little earthworks. I also made it by myself. And normally I had a crew of people, I had backhoes, I had help. So this was something I could make by myself during the period that I was in residency there. And then we can just move on to the next work, which was an underground piece, which was much more, yes. And this was built actually in '75 for a big exhibition, and it was much more ambitious. It took months to make, and I had a lot of teamwork, and it was rebuilt at Art Mine many years later. And at that time, I still was interested very much in what I would call non-functional architecture, meaning I had to give it a function because it wasn't fulfilling one. And I wanted to sort of be underground, under the earth, not make a big aggressive statement. But part of it was to kind of give you a sort of physical and then a psychological feeling, to put yourself, in both cases, you could feel very comfortable and secure underground, and then you could also feel sort of a little frightened or trapped. Let's see the next picture, and this shows you as you move underground from light to dark to light to dark. Could you change the slide, please? Yeah, and this gives you a sense of what it was like under there. So I wanted the work to sort of insert itself in the world, to be comfortable in the world, but to have some kind of bite, so to speak. Not anything that was truly dangerous, but to make it have something like the experience of the world at the same time. And now we'll move on to the next. What I've felt then and now is that when you're in the white space of a gallery, it's art, and you can say it's art and people believe it. When it's, we're saying, I'm putting something in here, it's the gallery, it's art. When it goes outside, it's in the world, and it's in the world with everything else in the world. And if it's just this kind of lone little orphan that says art with quotations, to me, it's a lone little orphan, and it doesn't mean very much. And so I like to have a conversation with the context in which I have inserted the work. And here you can see, this is in Nashville, Tennessee. It was an old industrial complex. There's a stadium in back. And I was trying really to have a conversation with the stadium, with the water, with the bridges that are all around it, and to not just say it's good because it's art, but it's interesting because it's just in the world with everything else. So I can see, Elise, you want to say something now.
Well, I think that that's a beautiful concept of art that is outside, needing to be in conversation with the context. And it makes me think of our very first conversation. And I asked you about public art, and we immediately got to a point where we discussed how poorly we thought the term fit. So I'm just curious how the term public versus outdoors differ for you, and how that plays into your very intentional practice of having art that dialogues with the context.
Well, I think public art sometimes gets confused with something that's easy and that everyone has to understand. And you know, I'm not in, and that somehow it's a compromise because everyone has to understand it, so we have to dumb it down. And that was not what I was interested in doing. I was interested in working on an architectural scale. I was interested in working in the world, and the world can be very exciting and very interesting and very provocative, but it doesn't have to be easy. And sometimes the world can also be ugly and confrontational visually. But, and so I really, the notion that it's almost like it has to be pop culture, which everyone understands, was something that I'm always sort of I'm against, I'm in contrast to, but at the same time, I don't want the work to be so difficult to understand, at least initially, that you have to take a course in art history to understand abstract art. So what I wanted to do, and is to, just the way a piece of architecture has to be visually exciting, but also can be innovative. And now whether you know, I say, whether it is or not, I want to work in that world, in that in-between world where it's there with everything else. It could be visually stimulating, but it's also not art with quotation marks around it or so dumbed down that everybody gets it. So now we can just go on to the next work. And this one is inside the white space. It is called The Wavy Emperor, but I could see it being outside. And what I like about some of the images that I use is I say they're generic. In other words, the wavy emperor is a mathematical form called the wavy emperor, but it could also be a shiitake mushroom. It could also be a butterfly. It could also be an orchid. It could also be a variety of things. And when I say my work isn't abstract, it's not. It's sort of a generic sort of image before it specializes into something that's a literal representational image. But I could see this outside very easily, sort of planted somewhere in a garden where it's a strange phenomena amongst other natural elements. Go ahead, Elise. I'll keep going.
I was actually just going to ask you where outside you might envision the wavy emperor.
I would see it a little bit as the alien intruder into the garden. And I am a gardener. I'm a bad gardener, but I'm going to fess up that I love gardening and I love flowers. I love them. All right.
I'm a bad knitter, so we're in the same place.
Yes. Okay. All right. On to the next. And then we get into the Twister series. So it's literally going from a 74, 75, and a very early work was where I put a pile of sand in the center of a space and I put fans all around it. I tried to make a dust devil and I couldn't. I just made waves. And that was really early in my career. So this notion about wind and water and waves has been in and out of the career. But this is the Twister series, where I became interested in weather patterns, tornadoes, hurricanes, wind movement. And it went up and down Park Avenue as a metaphor for energy and as these invisible forces that we're all surrounded by. And they can be, and we can just move on to the next. This is not Park Avenue. This is, but what happened, these pieces were on Park Avenue and then they went into nature. And this is the piece this is the show, the exhibition in Stockholm right now that ends at the end of the month. And what I wanted, here again, you see a piece at the far end, having a dialogue with the bridge, as well as having a dialogue with nature. And so we get both. And I want the work to, again, have a conversation. Now, it may be that I'm looking at some very scientific, mathematical phenomena to make something, but in the end, I also want it to be apprehensible to the average, to a person, if they just use their eyes and their experience and their common sense. The Turbulence series that these pieces, and we'll go on to the next, and you're just going to see at the very end now, the next slide. The Turbulence series, and did we skip over one, or is this, all right. So this is called Maelstrom, and it comes from wave movement, and it also is talking to the clouds. In other words, I'm looking at natural phenomena, things like smoke and clouds, and I'm trying for a moment, almost like a stop motion, what is it like if you could stop it? And then it has a conversation with the ever-changing scene of nature, clouds, wind. The final thing I'd like to say, and then I'll let you again chime in, Elise, is I think artists have always been interested in wind, and they show it in drapery. They've been always interested in the things that they can't quite hold in their hand, that in a moment it's here and gone, but they try to capture it for a moment, these invisible forces. And so I don't think that what I'm interested in is anything new. It's just simply another version. And now the next slide, and then I'll shut up, Elise, and you can, this is called Devil Whirl. And it's wind, it's also dancing movement, zigging and zagging. But what were you going to say, Elise? And I think our time is going to be up soon.
Well, yes, I was just going to say that I could ask you about a million more questions, but I think that we need to let Ursula and Lisa.
Okay. So at the end, there might be one more image and then we're gone. Is there one more, Beth, or is that it? We're over, I think. Correct? All right, so I'm going to leave the stage, and Ursula, you're going to, and I'm going to mute and go away. All right.
Thank you, Alice.
Here I go. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Elise and Alice. That was wonderful. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa. I'm so pleased to be able to introduce and speak to Ursula von Rydingsvard, whose work is represented in more than 30 museum collections and exhibited nationally and internationally. She's been honored with numerous awards, including the International Sculpture Center Lifetime Achievement Award and the NMWA's Lifetime Achievement Award for Excellence in the Arts. Her large-scale, sometimes monumental abstract sculptures reveal the trace of the human hand and resemble wooden bowls, tools, and walls that seem to echo the artist's family heritage in pre-industrial Poland before World War II. So Ursula, it is such a treat to be in conversation with you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. It's remarkable to think that large bowl was installed at Williams 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'm really struck by how much the campus has changed over those years and how the experience mm-hmm. of the sculpture shifts in relation to those changes in the surroundings. I can't say the shifts are always welcome, the changes in the surroundings. And we always, we've had a number of conversations over the years about how to address those. But this is so often the case when works are in outdoor public space, right? And you know, there's so much we can talk about with your work, Ursula, so many directions we could go, but our overarching topic tonight
and when did you start working on it with me?
Well,
years, right?
Yes, it's been a few years. You know, and you've had various conversations with various folks over the years, but I was here right after it came, and then we've been working together as the campus changes and the context changes. I mean, tonight's topic is really a lot to do with siting of outdoor work, and we've selected images of just a few of your outdoor projects that kind of give a context for a large bowl. And so I'll hope as we walk through the images, I hope that you can talk to us a little bit about your approach to siting as we go along. But while we have large bowl on the screen, and before we jump to the other images, I was hoping that you could talk just a little bit about the bowl form, you know, what that means for you, and kind of maybe a few words about how large bowl was made.
You know, when I do my work, I really don't know what it means. And I don't want to know what it means. And I don't want to be building the work, you know, thinking about having to be, you know, to be meaningful in some specific way, you know, that would drive me nuts. But I use it in a way, I mean, it's obviously some kind of a bowl, but it's not a bowl in my head in the sense that I use the surfaces in a way that you know, no bowl looks like this. I mean, it's also many other things. But even in my, you know, when I title it, I use the word bowl, you know, sometimes because you just, you know, sometimes that's what happens. Anyway, this piece is bronze. And I patinaed it, I think, twice. And the most recent patina was what, about 2 years ago or a year and a half, something like that. Mm-hmm. And you had a wonderful lighting company that came with all guys, you know, that did a great job and stayed there toward the night in order to also get what the lighting does at night.
I think we have at the end of our group of images, we have an image of it in the evening, so we can see that towards the end of our slides. Well, maybe with that, we can start looking at some of the other works that we've selected tonight.
And Lisa, if you don't mind, I would like to read something. That it's not going to take very long, but I think this is a base, and this is the way I think, and I have often been asked the question of why I make art. So I'm going to try to answer it, and as you'll see, it's going to be an answer that is not. It doesn't particularly have the kind of clarity that actually answers the question. Why do I make art? Mostly to survive, to ease my high anxiety, to numb myself with the labor and the focus of building my work. Objects, or the process by which I can concretize my ideas, feel so good. Because I invariably, especially with my monstrous pieces, run into intense anxiety moments from which I have to unravel myself. Because there's a pleasure in it. Because there's pain in it. Because I endure a hefty load of self-doubt. Because I have confidence in the possibility of seeing this work through. Because I see life as being full of abominations. because life is full of marvels close to miracles, because I will never get who I am, because I want attention from those who make good art, because I need to use both my body and my mind. The labor of my body is what keeps me awake and alive, what numbs me and offers a kind of veneer between me and the things in life which are painful to face. Because the visuals, that which I perceive through my eyes, are an extraordinarily important part of my life. Because I don't want to be doing anything else with my life, that the building of my artwork feels like the most consequential thing I could be doing with my time. Because I can run into a world of my making, both physically and mentally. Because I like working with a group of assistants who become another kind of family. Because I like the daily rhythm of going to my studio. Because it's a place to put my pain, my sadness. Because there's a constant hope inside of me that this process will heal me, my family, and the world. Because it helps fight my inertia. Because I like embroidering around my long ago Polish fantasies. Because I can reach into the future with my work. Because I constantly need to try to better understand the immense suffering and pain of my family that I never seem to be able to really understand. And also because I want to get answers to questions for which I know there are no answers.
Ursula, that was beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm thinking as you were reading, I was looking at this beautiful image on the screen, and I'm, again, thinking about the ways that your work shows up in these very different settings, right? Some of them are very urban settings. We're going to see examples of all of this. You have quite a few on college and university campuses. You have these that are, set in these really expansive natural settings. And so I wonder if you could just walk us through some of these examples and kind of just talk us through a little bit how you think about the work, in its site and in its location.
In this particular case, and the name of this piece is Luba, and Luba, I name, I don't know, probably 70% of my titles are Polish. And it's a way of my keeping that for myself. Mm-hmm. And I keep thinking that when I name a piece in Polish, that nobody's really gonna, that you're not then naming it like this is a bowl with stripes, or this is what, what I mean? Right. That they're not just coming and thinking they're understanding what they're seeing from the title. So with this title, it's but it's a very Luba has something to do with love, anyway, but it's not love.
I'm struck in this one, this one's made of cedar, whereas ours is bronze. Do you want to talk briefly about
it's bronze partially in the two thin linear structures that go from the elbow or something to the ground.
Okay,
that is bronze, but it has a transition, and I patinaed it such so that you can't really tell much of the difference. But I could not make something that's this vulnerable and this slender in cedar. The rest of it is cedar.
Mm.
And there's a beautiful, beautiful, you can see an alleyway, you know, where there are trees to the right and trees to the left. And this one is not quite in the right position, or the photographer wasn't in the right position to get that. But I meant that to be a kind of framework for that piece.
Sure. Maybe let's take a look at the next one.
So this one is at Barclay Center. And the installation of this for me was like glorious. You know, we were up all night, all the people that were the truck drivers, first of all. And when I took the cover, that plastic cover off of her on the truck, it just felt so good. So she's there on this huge plaza at the Barclay Center, and there's always on this inner, you see the above sort of huge opening. So I put her just under a sliver of the roof because the building itself is huge. You know, so I tried very hard to figure out where she could have a position of pride. So this is.
I noticed you're calling her, and you've often referred to Large Bowl that way as well. But I know the title, right? Ona.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Ona is a female.
Yeah.
Yes, that's referring to a female. It's an A ending.
Mm-hmm.
And this is made in bronze, and this is the one that I love it when people feel it, like because wherever they feel it, there's acid on your fingers. You know, you're going to slowly take off the patina, and I like the results of that. So that's happened a lot, constantly with that piece.
And the piece is in Brooklyn, where you live and where your studio is, right? So you have the opportunity to see it change in kind of time, right?
And I've been in Brooklyn for 53 years, and I never would have guessed that would happen in my life.
Oh,
however,
wonderful.
It's a great place to have a studio. Great place.
Let's. I think I want to keep us moving because I know we have a number of more images to look through, and maybe we can, and give us
this is at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and it's in Wakefield, in England. This is cedar. It's whatever darkness you see is, or if it's really dark, that I put the same stuff that's in your pencil, but it becomes ground very, very finely, like flour. So I put that on with a brush and a spray glue, and then it makes its own way, and it ends up being silver, because that's what cedar does when there's enough sun around it, and the inner parts stay darker. Anyway, it's a great park, and I had a lot of pieces there. I don't know, maybe 30, 40 pieces there. So it was just a wonderful thing to do.
Beautiful, wonderful. Let's maybe see the next.
Yep. This is Iggy's Pride, and this is a piece on Oliver Ranch in Geyserville, California. And we built this on site. We had a good number of people working for us from Mexico. And I fed them all lunch. I think they were like, I don't know, I can't remember now exactly, but there were like 9 people, and all of them we wrote that we burnt in their names in the sides of one of these wedges, and it's really bigger than what you think. The back part of the piece, the highest part of the piece is about height of a human being. So you can walk in between them, and they get to see, these wedges get to see a beautiful, beautiful scene in front of them or in the distance.
Wonderful. I'm seeing a couple of questions that might be relevant here. Someone's asking about how the siting of a work, it might influence the choice of materials you use, and how much is it kind of determined by the size or the shape?
You know, I walked this land for 3 days, and I just happened to love this hilltop, which had this fabulous thing that you can look in the distance, and the sun would rise up from that side, and that was it. And I knew that I had to make something that butted itself against a wall, so that I made that wall, and then we built this on the site, and it was such a, you know, family-like, really. I can't even say it was fun, because it really wasn't fun. Because it, you know, at 12 o'clock it was 110, 115 degrees. So this was very, you know, very hot. But it was, I don't know, it was just wonderful. And there's a, yeah.
Well, let's. It looks extraordinary. I wish I could experience this in person.
I made kind of a nest, but the nest is a long rectangle.
Let's keep moving,
Yes.
because I think we want to make sure we have plenty of time. We have two views of this same sculpture, so maybe let's move to the next view.
Yeah, this is the front view, and the tops of these pieces go as high as your neck, or as high as, well, depending on how tall you are. They're not as tall as the human, but almost.
Wow.
But it's one
hard
of the
to tell from this angle. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But this is the back of it that we're seeing. And it sort of spreads itself out a little bit more. And you can walk through these openings, these in-between spaces. So let's see the next one.
I think, yeah, we'll move on to a new.
We didn't. Okay. This one.
Yeah.
So you can see here more clearly, even though they look miniature, that you're still at shoulder height, and that there's a kind of energy. But the most important thing is that I put them on a hillside.
Okay.
And we also built it there. We were there for a good number of months, building it, and, you know, cutting the cedar and all of that. So it is so much more difficult to get something that's a curve, but the curve is what made the piece. And you can see that there are some passages that are bigger that one could go through, and it was really, again, fun to we all pitched tents, and we all, had, because they had an apple orchard, so all the apples were falling on top of our tents all night.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
so great, so great. And we worked 7 days a week, and we worked like 10 hours a day at least.
Oh,
Yeah, but no, it's good.
extraordinary.
It's good. This is good.
Wonderful. Yes. Let's take a look at the last few. I think we're quite getting quite up to our time limit, so let's keep moving.
Okay, this piece is bronze bowl with lace, and I have done this in the last 4 or 5 years. And the putting in of the lace is an extraordinarily difficult technical thing to do. Again, this is this is bronze.
Sure.
So the good thing about bronze, it lasts for 2,000 years. Cedar definitely does not. And then the upper portions that the making of this lace, and it's not just making dots, but they're patterns. There are communities of openings. Okay, we can keep going. And this is about 23 feet high.
Beautiful.
And this is Elegantka. This is a resin piece. I've done a number of resin pieces. And she is about, I don't know, 5 heads above a human.
Mm-hmm.
But she's so beautiful. The resin is all about light. And this is at night, obviously, and at day, the sun takes care of that. So we put the lights off at day, and then, they come on at night.
Beautiful. Well, I think with our last slide, we're returned to large bowl. And in this slide, we can see a little bit better the context of Morley Circle, where it is on campus with one of the Davis Center buildings in the background and the new science building. And you can see the lighting that we were able to install. And you mentioned the lighting. You were very pleased when we were able to light. For years, we had been hoping to get light on the sculpture. But the tricky thing about lighting in that area of campus is the astronomy department is there and the telescope is there. And that's where they do their viewings, and having any uplighting is challenging. But when they were doing the science building, we were able to get lighting installed, right? As long as the astronomy department can turn it off when they need to. And so they have control over that, and they are able to turn it off when they need to turn it off. But otherwise, we're able to have this beautiful lighting at night.
That somehow this photograph really doesn't represent it well.
It's tricky with photos. And I think also on your screen, we talked about this, I think the color on your screen might make it look more extreme.
I see.
Than it really
That's
is.
True. That's true.
But yeah, anyway. So Ursula, I have to ask one more time, because I know a lot of people are wondering. Again, when you use she in reference to your sculptures, what does that mean for you?
I don't know what the meaning is. It's just what I have to do, and they are she's. They just are.
They just are.
I have made a few he's, but not too many. Yes.
We didn't.
But the thing of it is,
didn't see any tonight.
Not everybody gets a he or she. The designation.
Okay.
Yeah. Not all of them get that.
Not all of them do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ursula. We'll have a little more time to chat all together as a group, but I think at this point I'm going to turn it over to Pam and Rona.
Thank you so much, Ursula and Lisa and Alice and Elise. Wow, what amazing conversations. I am honored and thoroughly delighted to introduce Rona Pondick. Rona Pondick is a sculptor who lives and works in New York City. She studied sculpture at the Yale School of Art, where she received her MFA in 1977. And throughout her career has been remarkably adventurous and intuitive in the most profound ways. And her experimentation with different materials and her exploration of the human body, hybridity, nature, really looking forward to the conversation tonight with Rona. Since 1984, she has been in more than 48 solo exhibitions, has had more than 48 solo exhibitions of her work in museums and galleries internationally. And her sculpture has been included in more than 200 group exhibitions, including many biennials worldwide. The Williams College Museum of Art is one of over 40 museums that are fortunate to have Rona's sculptures in their collection. Her cast aluminum work tree from 1999 that you see on the screen here is the most recent addition of Rona Pondick's work to the Williams College Museum of Art. It was recently gifted to the museum by Eric and Fran Rosenfeld, and we are profoundly grateful for this incredibly generous gift that is going to be a really wonderful addition to the collection. As I mentioned in my introduction, it hasn't actually been installed yet, so we have that to look forward to. So Rona, we have the fun of thinking forward together, starting tonight, and actually starting already in preparation for tonight and on the occasion of this wonderful gift of tree to Williams. And I thought, to start tonight, we would start with the work itself, since it hasn't actually been sited on campus yet. And one of the things I really love about this work and am preoccupied with, as you know, is that it's very much of the landscape as well as intended to be in it. And when I say of the landscape, I mean its very form and existence sort of depends on your engagement with the natural world. I wonder if you would start by talking about how you made the tree.
Okay. Could we cycle through some of the images? Because I'm gonna talk specifically about the tree, but then also talk about the wide range of images that I've worked with over the years. And when I started the tree, when collectors turned to me, let's hold on this. They said, would you like to do an outdoor piece? And this was in the mid-90s, and I had never done an outdoor piece. And I kept thinking, nature is tough. It's awesome. It's powerful. I don't know. That's a tough thing to compete with. And then I thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So I'm going to steal from nature. I'm going to take nature directly and have a real direct dialogue with it. And of course, how do you get something that's such a crazy form like a tree to cast? These trees are in 500-600 parts in order to be cast and then brought back together. And in order for them to actually flow in the process of casting, it has to be tapered in a specific way. So what do? I make my trees up. They're fictions. They're not actual trees. They're like erector sets. I have bins and bins of different kinds of species of trees. And I do this for the skin of the tree. If you could just keep cycling through again and go back to the beginning. what is interesting for me is working with a very wide range of not just parts like the tree. Can you go to the next image? With the tree, I originally wanted to see what would happen if I took the tree, installed it in its natural habitat where you expect it, but underneath it are these heads with teeth, and they're not expected. And I like the fact that it's not expected. Can we go to the next image? This is Little Bathers, and this is where the first teeth piece for me started. And it happened because a friend said, let's go to a Renoir Bathers show. And my back went up because I hate Renoir's bathers. I got dragged to see this show, and my response was so visceral that it put my teeth on edge. And I wanted to see what would happen if I took that feeling and put it into a sculpture. And that's where Little Bathers came from. And this was the first teeth piece. Could you go to the next image? Beth, can you go to the next one? No, it should be the dirt heads, yeah. So this is the last teeth piece that I did. What you can't tell from the image is that this is 10 tons of earth. And it's about 6 feet high in the corner and spans about 30 feet by 30 feet. And the piece has traveled from Johannesburg, and then it went to the Netherlands, and then it went to Austria, and then the Lyon Biennale. And in each situation and in each country, when it got talked about and written about, you would think they were talking about completely different sculptures, because where it was shown was getting very directly connected to how the work was being talked about. And I'm interested in how you go from something like this, where it's made of earth and wax and plastic. Go back to the image before, Little Bathers. And this with the bubblegum pink and how different it feels. And then go back again to the heads under the tree. Can you go back to the first one? The first tree in the spring? I'm very much in love with materials. I don't think there's a material I haven't used to make a piece of art. I'm interested when you take a work and you have it indoors, how you experience it. Then when you go outdoors, how do you experience it differently? I'm very interested in the visceral response that the viewer has to my work, where you feel it physically in your own body. And it's something that I get very, very interested and excited by. When I first moved into my studio here about 11 years ago, I had bins and bins of these tree parts and body parts, and someone turned to me as I was moving in and said, "Oh my God, an axe murderer is moving in here." I'm interested in how people relate to the body and what you experience, how things are contradictory, how things are not one thing. Can we cycle through the images now again?
Rona, can I ask?
Sure.
It's so interesting seeing these different iterations of the teeth elements, because with the tree, it's almost like fallen fruit that you happen upon and it surprises you. But with Little Bathers, it's a spread of the bubblegum pink. It's like a carpet of the pieces that really exist kind of in relationship to the architecture. And I wonder, and here, for example, with dirt heads, it's a very different relationship of the form to earth than in tree. So I wonder, it's like the teeth are traveling through your work.
They are. And, I'm interested in how, something I should say is I think as much of a control freak I am, because I really do want to control the viewer, it's impossible. But I'm looking for images that flip in their reading. Teeth, we devour, we eat, they're sexual. We leave them behind after we die. They're very strong metaphorically, and I love that. It's like a Rorschach in a way for me. It lends itself in such a clear way, because what's art without the viewer? And the viewer brings their history to the work. And so there's an interesting dialogue that starts to happen. I'm thrilled when someone tells me, oh my God, that piece is terrifying. And then 2 minutes later, someone else walks up to me and says, oh my God, that's ridiculous. It's so funny. And I think it's interesting that people can have such different responses, and I want both. I think what you're saying about Little Bathers, and can we go back to Little Bathers? It is very bubblegum pink. And I think it has a very different reading than the earth piece does, or the teeth under the tree, where the teeth under the tree, because of how you relate to the tree. Let's go to the tree for a minute. I think one of the most amazing moments for me was when someone told me that the first time after the tree was installed on their property, that someone said, oh, I know you have a piece by Rona Pondick, where is it? And they said, oh, you're about 30 feet away from it. And then they started realizing, oh, that tree, it's silver. Wait a minute. And then they started walking closer, and then they see these teeth, and there was this moment where they pulled back, and I loved the way it unfolded. And I love the fact that in the summer, it looks barren, but during the winter, it looks like it makes sense. It's barren like everything else is around it. So the way it's changing within nature is really interesting to me. And I think the way you come upon the heads underneath, from a distance, you can just think they're fallen fruits. I kid around and call them my forbidden fruits. I think, again, when you look at the way I use the teeth and the other pieces, you just experience them very, very differently. And I'm interested in that. Can we move forward again? Stop here. So this is also in your collection.
Yes, it is.
And in my earliest pieces, when I was at Yale, someone walked in, and it was Robert Herbert, and he started talking to me about the scatology in my work. And I was like, I had to go look it up. And when I looked it up, I thought, oh my God, he said my work is like shit. And then I found myself in the mid-'80s where my work was very clearly scatological in a very direct way. And what is on that little bed is a bronze turd. We could spend hours talking about the Freudian interpretations, about why I was using the imagery, but we don't have the time for it. I've spent 35 years on an analyst's couch trying to understand why I do half of what I do. But we don't need to discuss that here.
But I do think there's a connection I'd love to ask you about. You've talked about the bed as an important motif in your work because human beings spend so much of our lives in bed, a third of our lives roughly in bed. And the title of this work is I Want. And it is, clearly about desire and a certain kind of mystery of what that might entail. I wonder if you might relate that to your practice in some way.
Well, the bed is the place where more happens to you than almost anywhere else. It's where you're born. It's where you dream. It's where you live out your fantasies. It's where you have sex. It's where you're sick and where you die. I love that. I think that sets the stage for everything. And I'm attracted to those objects or things that are highly charged. And we're wanting machines. We want everything, but then when we get it, we don't want it. Isn't that life? Isn't that the driving force that keeps us from getting depressed, wanting? And then if you go to the next image, yeah. So this was a site-specific installation that was also part of a performance at the Next Wave Festival. And go to the next image. The bed actually functioned as a second stage where the dancers performed, and it's a 20-foot bed. What was interesting is, and the reason I actually wanted to put this in for everyone to see, if you go to the next image, this is granite bed. And Pam, this is how we first met. Collectors wanted to donate as they were downsizing and selling their home where this was commissioned for. They had seen the performance, go back to the performance, from the Next Wave Festival. They had seen that bed. And right after the performance, the collector came up to me and said, "Oh, I want that outside." And I thought, great, of course, I want all over the place. And she's telling me I want this outside. And I said, well, it's not possible outside, but maybe in another material it would be possible. And so that's when I translated this into the granite bed. And if you go to the next image, you can see the words "I want" scribbled across it.
So I think I just was going to say, the bed iconography is so powerful because we as viewers experience it in such an embodied way. We can relate to the notion of a bed because we've slept in beds and everything else you mentioned. And then you go and make this transition to performance with embodied elements animating the work, and then to nature and to the need to work outdoors and make another transition with this piece. And then with the recent installation at the Yale Law School, where the work is located, and you can see in situ in this image, it's animated by people in a different way. You don't see people in this particular photograph, but it's situated in a courtyard that is very much aligned with a student center. And I think you talked about citing the work in that area specifically because it was a place that was intended to be very much enlivened by student presence and discussion and debate.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because for me, every time you take a sculpture and its context changes, whether it's indoors, outdoors, or outdoors to outdoors in another setting, if this were not in an architectural setting, it would look so different. on a field. And I think that's really interesting to see how sculpture relates to nature or to architecture. I mean, this bed, I know people have said, ooh, it's a little eerie because the top part of the headboard starts looking like a tombstone. And so it starts feeling like it has a strong death component to it. And hear these words, I want. And so the whole idea of a life cycle gets very closely embraced, which I think is really interesting as well. Can we go to the next image of the trees again? You know, how the difference between the piece that's coming to Williams, which is going to be a lot of fun for us to try to figure out, do we want it in a more extremely one-to-one relationship with nature? Do we want it to be more nature architecture? How do we want it to exist? Do we want it to be in a situation where it's clustered more in trees, not out more in an open area? Because each way we cite it, it's going to be very different. And it's going to be interesting to see how and what we do together, and fun. And great, because it'll mean the virus is over, which would be great, you know, for that to happen. And curious for me too, because this was the last tree piece that I made with teeth under it. And since then, it became trees with heads in it. And I love the journeys that these pieces and images make through my work. I know you had asked me to share with people a story that I had fun talking to you about on one of the many great conversations that we've had together, where I was sitting on a panel early in the 90s, and someone said to me, so why are you using teeth in your work? And I panicked because I hadn't really thought about really why am I using teeth in my work? And before I knew it, I told 200 people that when I'm angry, I want to bite people. And so I thought I'd put it in my work. And at the end of the panel, this woman walks up to me, very, very beautiful suit, bluish hair. And I figured she must have been a trustee. And she said, oh, sweetheart, I know exactly what you're talking about. When I gave birth, I wanted to eat my child. And I went out and bought a suckling pig, the same size as my child, and ate the whole thing. And I remember thinking, they say artists are weird?
That is such a remarkable story. Such an amazing story. Well, Rona, thank you. This has just been a terrific voyage together through your work and your creative thinking. And I really look forward to continuing the conversation about Tree and its next chapter at Williams. And I think with that, we can open up the conversation and to all of the participants and invite some questions from the audience. So let's see. There's some interesting questions about the practicalities of installing large-scale sculpture and committing to large-scale sculpture. So one of the attendees has asked whether, he said, I'm wondering if the artists creating large-scale sculptures that require installation crews enjoy or have difficulty with or simply endure leading the installation process, you know, hiring, managing, directing people. How do you think about the collaborative aspects of installing large-scale sculpture? You can't hear?
I can
No.
hear. I just don't know who's supposed to answer.
Oh, I'm
Oh.
sorry. Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
no, it's good. Any of
sorry.
you could answer. I think it's a general question to all of you. And the question, and Rona, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, good. And so if everybody can hear it, the question is really how you feel about how you orchestrate the installation process when you're working with installation crews and sort of managing that whole process, which is, can be so elaborate. Does that something you
Okay, so
enjoy?
I'll answer. I'll start.
Mhm.
The way I see what I do to some degree is after I have spent time in the studio thinking, imagining, being by myself, then it's kind of like being an architect or a director of a film and having a construction company. And at this point, I'm very technical. There are people that work for me that are architects and very good at computers, and we create designs in computers. They're sent to a fabrication studio that I have in Fort Lauderdale. I have an engineer on tap who engineers the work and who then signs and stamps things, and we do it all over the United States or wherever in the world we're working. And it's very much like a construction company, and it goes from something that's very intimate, touchy-feely to something that has a very large crew of people. There's, it's a big operation, and I enjoy that. I like being the person who dreams it up and then allows other people to fabricate and to install, and I watch it every step of the way. But I like to spend a lot of my time dreaming the things up and then not trying to figure out every technique just in a sense by my own hands, but investigating all the possible options out there now, particularly because there's so many new materials and ways of forming and making things. And then it ends up after it's installed with a big crew, that then it comes back to me as something that I think about and imagine and like or dislike. But I suppose I have always liked playing to a big team and having a big team. And it also keeps me very disciplined. Because I know that I have to run a company, so to speak, and I get off on that. Okay.
Thank you.
It's interesting because indoors, outdoors, I think there are always issues and challenges that you get involved with, whether you want to or not. I know there was a time that I got invited a couple of times to some outdoor international exhibitions, and people were afraid that in a public park there were going to be people touching things. And I remember one of the curators came up with the idea of trying to figure out if we could float the tree in the middle of a lake or a pond. And we had to come up with a structure and a scuba diver that mounted a foundation for the piece in this pond. And luckily it was so muddy and disgusting, no one could see the guts of the piece. So it looked like it was floating on water, which was fantastic. And I could never have come up with such a great idea on my own. And it was lovely to have that injected. Or right now, the dirt head piece is going to Germany to a big exhibition. And we've been for months trying to figure out how do we bring 10 tons of earth into a museum where there are 20 historical works of art cohabitating without physically getting them contaminated by the earth. And so we've spent months trying to figure out what to do. Or my just saying to a German museum, oh, get 10 tons of dirt. And then the director of the museum call me and say, everyone is hysterical at the museum because they think you want 10 tons of shit. That is not, dirt means schmutz, you know? And so I said, oh, earth, 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 earth. So interesting things happen. It's not just outdoors. I think indoors, outdoors, there are always crazy challenges when sculpture is involved.
Thank you. Ursula, do you want to weigh in on that question?
Yeah, and it's going to be pretty short because I don't like particularly all of the details that need to be known and that need to be made in order to do the installation. You know, all the engineering, all the that to me, when the piece goes into the ground, it just, you know, it's the excitement is sort of wedding with the visuals of what you did, and visuals of where you're putting it, the visuals of the piece itself, and often it feels so good. It's the drama of something that is coming to completion, that you have worked on for a very, very long time, and hoping that some things would happen in it when you finally installed it. So there's a lot of planning, and I don't want to do the planning. I have somebody in my studio who has always done the planning, but he also has help from foundries that help me do the pieces. And they have engineers there, and we know which one is the best, or you know, we not only one, but it's very complicated. And I don't particularly want to be a part of that, but I do want to feel, because you when you work on a piece, it's constant, you know, it's a constant focus and a constant will and a constant want, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And you're always guessing, you know, you don't really know where you're going, or you certainly don't know why you're doing what you're doing. So, but those are also times that, you know, that have these, but I think for me, it's like the end, the installation is like putting the crown on the king. And if it looks good, it, you know, it just feels good to you. And if it looks crappy, it feels the same way on the inside of me, of the artist.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a great question from our friend Maggie Adler. And she asks, because this is a group of artists interested in the environment and the natural world, does the current scope of environmental destruction influence what you're doing now?
It doesn't. It does for me in a very kind of direct way. And I know, because I've used such varying materials, the question I'm always asked is this archival? And I remember the last time a group of people were in my studio and someone asked if the work was archival. And I said, yeah, I actually tested it this time with a conservator at the Museum of Natural History. And so all the materials are archival. But at this point, does it matter? will anything last? And I realized at that point, a lot of the imagery I was using was actually directly kind of addressing this. I'm encasing my own head in acrylic as though it's either dead or giving birth to itself, but it looks like it's encased in ice. Where are we gonna be in another 20, 30 years? I know I'm sitting in my studio and I'm on a floodplain and I'm terrified that I'm gonna get wiped out with the next hurricane. I got clobbered in Sandy, and the fires in California. I mean, we're all trying to make things that are going to last forever, but what does that mean now?
I think I always accepted the fact that much of what I do or did was erased and only existed as photographic documentation. So I would say the first half of my career really exists as drawings and photographic documentation and doesn't exist as permanent work. And I also think when you put something out into the world, at some point you have to give it up and people do whatever they do with it. But I also think that for myself, I've always been attempting, whether I've succeeded, in thinking about, particularly with the twisters, a kind of underlying compositional system which suggests something other than the grid and order and the kind of way that human beings try to impose something on the world, as opposed to kind of being in the world and understanding what this other underlying order is. And I remember I fly a lot, and looking down and you will see grid after grid after grid, and then you'll see what a river does or what the land does when it's left to its own devices, or what a forest does. And that's a sort of alternate system which isn't as clear and ordered as the grid, which is what we have, particularly in America, have imposed on our world. But I also think that this so-called chaotic organization, which I'm interested in, whether it's truly chaotic or not, is what I like to think of right now is there's a kind of vast Venn diagram with many different systems interacting, and at any moment something else. And that intrigues me. And it's the kind of underlying system which intrigues me and obsesses me, and which I do feel is in some way relevant to the world we're in, where all these different systems are now interacting in untold ways, unpredictable ways, and we have absolutely no idea how it's going to end up. And that's about all I can do right now. Not actually even try to make something that I think is going to last forever and ever, because I think that's kind of impossible. And I'm not even interested in doing that, but I am interested in trying to find a system that feels as though it in some way relates to the world that we find ourselves in. And maybe have always found ourselves in, as opposed to imposing something on the world. But who knows? I have lately, as we are constantly being, every day there's another and another and another awful thing being hurled around the world. And it does feel, I'm not sure that art is going to save us. I'm sorry, Pam, you said that. It's so relevant. I don't really know at this point. I don't know what's relevant. I think we're in the middle of a kind of apocalyptic, just sort of chaotic bowl of who knows what. And I think we're all just trying to live from moment to moment, day to day, and catch our breath and hope that we can hold on. So anyway.
I like to think that art is going to save us. Maybe I'm a hopeless romantic, but I know that the minute the net opened, my friends said I looked like I was going scuba diving because I had my goggles and an N95 on, and I went up to the Met, and I was vibrating with joy to be back there. Maybe it's because I grew up in New York and the Met was like my first love.
Yeah. I agree with you about the Met. But as sort of an aside, right now the Times just said that the Brooklyn Museum is going to auction at Sotheby's a historical art. And I'm thinking, and I thought to myself, if art is going to save us, I guess that's how they're going to do it. They're going to auction off part of their historical collection. And speaking of permanence, I thought museums were supposed to be the place that believed in permanence as opposed to auctioning something off at Christie's whenever they need to or whatever. But in any case, I mean, I've made art all my life. It's the only thing that gives me any sense of self. Without it, I'm just a shell. But I also think that this is a rather, it's a deeply uncertain, terrifying moment. And maybe the art at the Met is going to save us. I'm not sure that everything that's auctioned off at Christie's or Sotheby's is going to, though. So we could get into a conversation about the art world as it exists right now, as opposed to what it existed when you were a young girl in New York. But I think it's a very different place. And a very, very different place. But at any rate, I'm just saying that right now, and I think all artists have made great art during periods like this. This world, this is not new. And as Ursula is talking about the aftermath of World War II and suffering and pain, and some of the best art comes out of that. And we are in one of those moments, and we'll see. But I also think it's very unsettling. And it would be ridiculous to think we're making something that's going to last forever. Because I don't know.
Well, I think you raised so many important points, Alice. And actually, the two questions that the audience have raised that you've variously answered among the three of you actually sort of come together in terms of the unknown conclusion of the narrative of the actual collaboration of making and installing and following through that track, and the unknown kind of future of the materials. Rona, you and I were talking earlier today about the inherent uncertainty of living as an artist. There's real world concerns that are uncertain, but there's also the kind of constant unknown if you're truly seeking your artistic path and your creative vision of where you're going to end up. And I think that really does resonate with life in troubled times and in the current moment. I don't think I would go so far as to say that art is going to save us, but I do think it's more important now than ever because of exactly what you're saying, Alice. That really, without these moments of truth where we can be more than just a shell of ourselves and have these kinds of exchanges, I think it becomes really intolerable to live through these incredibly scary, trying times. And I do think that it's moments like this, talking to the three of you and hearing about your process and your lives in art and the ongoing chapters of the works of art at Williams College and elsewhere, it's a really helpful moment in a very uncertain and scary and potentially very isolating world. So
I'd like to say one other thing, that I think there's a certain kind of paradox. And I just read today in the Times that I forget how many different animals are now extinct in the last 50 years because of human interaction and interference. And I do think we are at this moment. This is a topic about art and artists and nature, where we have so interfered with nature that we are bringing about a collapse. Now, and so there's this kind of irony that our brain and our consciousness, which we hold as so important and has been this journey over thousands of years to get to this moment, is also part of what is causing the collapse of nature, or let's say nature in a different way. And so I think that there is a paradox and about all of that, and it's deep within even this topic that we have, art and nature, and how we interfere, and also are part and parcel of the problem, living every day in whatever way. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I do think that there is a deep inherent paradox in this. One more thing is that I've always noticed when I travel through the world that particularly in Europe, that they allow for nature, they make a place for it. Whereas we in America just assumed it was always going to be there. And we just pushed in and thought, okay, we finished with that. Now let's leave it for someone else to clean up and go somewhere else. And that has also been our undoing. Okay, that's it for me.
You make me think that it's nature, but it's also human nature. The same way that one minute you want to embrace the person next to you, and then you want to swat them for saying something stupid or doing something stupid. We have horrible impulses as human beings. We are creating amazing things scientifically, and we are destroying the planet simultaneously.
Yep.
We're awful and we're incredible.
Right, exactly. But it's now reached a fever pitch.
It's pretty terrible.
Yeah.
We created this virus and we don't want to own it.
Right.
It's complicated, but life has always been complicated. There are great images of the plague. I started looking at them in a lot of books, going through all the paintings and thinking, oh my God, those great beaks that were made were masks to protect people. This is not new. Hopefully we'll get through this, I hope.
Well, it's the way every type of organism, when it becomes, when there are too many of them, there's diseases that sort of, but we're fighting that as well.
Sure.
So, in other words, but prior to this, I mean, in any kind of animal group, when they are overpopulated, something happens and that, whittles it back down again. So, I mean, I don't know what to say, except that in certain ways throughout history, plagues have been beneficial, as a matter of fact. And, but at any rate, I think that for me, the real sort of sadness is that we have believed in this enormous progress, starting with with Mesopotamia, or wherever, the Garden of Eden, and this sense that we are moving forward and we will make a better world. And now we are stepping back and seeing that this so-called progress is also collapsing. And I've felt for some time that every technological innovation, which has many, many, many good results, is also the creation and the destruction gets wrapped around itself like DNA. And it always and that you can't do one without the other. But what we should be able to do at this point is foresee somehow how we could do something that would alleviate some of what's happening, but we don't seem to be able to even agree on how we could go about doing that. So,
I want to suggest, because we do
to
need to wrap up. We've come to the end, but when we come out on the other side of this moment, whatever that ends up looking like, I'm going to suggest we look back at this conversation and recognize how fortunate we all are to have the incredible insights that the three of you have brought tonight. And you're just been so generous sharing your creative process and all of your ideas. And we're so grateful to you, Alice, Ursula, and Rona, for this evening's program and for the incredible life and spirit that your art has brought to Williams College Museum of Art, and to the world. And this conversation has just been really illuminating and a highlight of these months. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you also to Lisa and Delise for your wonderful questions. And it's just been great to be together with all of you. And thank you to all of you in the audience for being here with us and for your great questions as well. So thank you.
Good night and good luck.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
you.
Bye.